The Son from America. The village of Lenchen was tiny, a sandy marketplace where the peasants of the area met once a week. It was surrounded by little huts with thatched roofs or shingles green with moss. The chimneys looked like pots. Between the huts there were fields where the owners planted vegetables or pastured their goats. In the smallest of these huts lived old Berl, a man in his 80s, and his wife, who was called Berl, wife of Berl. Old Berl was one of the Jews who had been driven from their villages in Russia and had settled in Poland. In Lenchen, they mocked the mistakes he made while praying aloud. He spoke with a sharp r. He was short, broad-shouldered, and had a small white beard, and summer and winter he wore a sheepskin hat, a padded cotton jacket, and stout boots. He walked slowly, shuffling his feet. He had a half-acre of field, a cow, a goat, and chickens. The couple had a son, Samuel, who had gone to America 40 years ago. It was said in Lenchen that he became a millionaire there. Every month, the Lenchen letter carrier brought old Berl a money order and a letter that no one could read, because many of the words were in English. How much money Samuel sent his parents remained a secret. 3 times a year, Berl and his wife went on foot to Zakroczym and cashed the money orders there. But they never seemed to use the money. What for? The garden, the cow, and the goat provided most of their needs. Besides, Berl sold chickens and eggs, and from these there was enough to buy flour for bread. No one cared to know where Berl kept the money that his son sent him. There were no thieves in Lenchen. The hut consisted of one room, which contained all their belongings, the table, the shelf for meat, the shelf for milk foods, the 2 beds, and the clay oven. Sometimes the chickens roosted in the woodshed, and sometimes when it was cold, in a coop near the oven. The goat, too, found shelter inside when the weather was bad. The more prosperous villagers had kerosene lamps, but Berl and his wife did not believe in newfangled gadgets. What was wrong with a wick in a dish of oil? Only for the Shabbat would Berl buy 3 tallow candles at the store. In summer, the couple got up at sunrise and retired with the chickens. In the long winter evenings, Berl spun flax at her spinning wheel, and Berl sat beside her in the silence of those who enjoy their rest. Once in a while, when Berl came home from the synagogue after evening prayers, he brought news to his wife. In Warsaw there were strikes demanding that the Tsar abdicate. A heretic by the name of Dr. Herzl had come up with the idea that Jews should settle again in Palestine. Berl listened and shook her bonneted head. Her face was yellowish and wrinkled like a cabbage leaf. There were bluish sacs under her eyes. She was half deaf. Berl had to repeat each word he said to her. She would say, "The things that happen in the big cities." Here, in Lenchen, nothing happened except usual events. A cow gave birth to a calf, a young couple had a circumcision party, or a girl was born and there was no party. Occasionally someone died. Lenchen had no cemetery, and the corpse had to be taken to Zakroczym. Actually, Lenchen had become a village with few young people. The young men left for Zakroczym, for Nowy Dvor, for Warsaw, and sometimes for the United States. Like Samuel's, their letters were illegible, the Yiddish mixed with the languages of the countries where they were now living. They sent photographs in which the men wore top hats and the women fancy dresses like squiresses. Berl and Berl also received such photographs, but their eyes were failing, and neither he nor she had glasses. They could barely make out the pictures. Samuel had sons and daughters with Gentile names, and grandchildren who had married and had their own offspring. Their names were so strange that Berl and Berl could never remember them. What difference do names make? America was far, far away on the other side of the ocean, at the edge of the world. A Talmud teacher who came to Lenchen had said that Americans walked with their heads down and their feet up. Berl and Berl could not grasp this. How was it possible? But since the teacher said it, so it must be true. Berl pondered for some time, and then she said, "One can get accustomed to anything." And so it remained. From too much thinking, God forbid, one may lose one's wits. One Friday morning, when Berl was kneading the dough for the Shabbat loaves, the door opened, and a nobleman entered. He was so tall that he had to bend down to get through the door. He wore a beaver hat and a cloak bordered with fur. He was followed by Chaskel, the coachman from Zakroczym, who carried 2 leather valises with brass locks. In astonishment, Berl raised her eyes. The nobleman looked around and said to the coachman in Yiddish, "Here it is." He took out a silver ruble and paid him. The coachman tried to hand him change, but he said, "You can go now." When the coachman closed the door, the nobleman said, "Mother, it's me, Samuel, your son, Sam." Berl heard the words, and her legs grew numb. Her hands, to which pieces of dough were sticking, lost their power. The nobleman hugged her, kissed her forehead, both her cheeks. Berl began to cackle like a hen. "My son!" At that moment, Berl came in from the woodshed, his arms piled with logs. The goat followed him. When he saw a nobleman kissing his wife, Berl dropped the wood and exclaimed, "What is this?" The nobleman let go of Berl and embraced Berl. "Father!" For a long time, Berl was unable to utter a sound. He wanted to recite holy words that he had read in the Yiddish Bible, but he could remember nothing. Then he asked, "Are you Samuel?" "Yes, Father, I am Samuel." "Well, Peace be with you." Berl grasped his son's hand. He was still not sure that he was not being fooled. Samuel wasn't as tall and heavy as this man. But then Berl reminded himself that Samuel was only 15 years old when he had left home. He must have grown in that faraway country. Berl asked, "Why didn't you let us know that you were coming?" "Didn't you receive my cable?" Samuel asked. Berl didn't know what a cable was. Berl had scraped the dough from her hands and enfolded her son. He kissed her again and asked, "Mother, didn't you receive a cable?" "What? If I live to see this, I'm happy to die," Berl said, amazed by her own words. Berl too was amazed. These were just the words he would have said earlier if he had been able to remember. After a while, Berl came to himself and said, "Pesha, you will have to make a double Shabbos pudding in addition to the stew." It was years since Berl had called Berl by her given name. When he wanted to address her, he would say, "Listen," or say. It is the young or those from the big cities who call a wife by her name. Only now did Berl begin to cry. Yellow tears ran from her eyes and everything became dim. Then she called out, "It's Friday. I have to prepare for the Shabbos." Yes, she had to knead the dough and braid the loaves. With such a guest, she had to make a larger Shabbos stew. The winter day is short, and she must hurry. Her son understood what was worrying her, because he said, "Mother, I will help you." Berl wanted to laugh, but a choked sob came out. "What are you saying? God forbid." The nobleman took off his cloak and jacket and remained in his vest, on which hung a solid gold watch chain. He rolled up his sleeves and came to the trough. "Mother, I was a baker for many years in New York," he said, and he began to knead the dough. "What? You are my darling son who will say Kaddish for me." She wept raspingly. Her strength left her, and she slumped into the bed. Berl said, "Women will always be women," and he went to the shed to get more wood. The goat sat down near the oven. She gazed with surprise at this strange man, his height and his bizarre clothes. The neighbors had heard the good news that Berl's son had arrived from America, and they came to greet him. The women began to help Berl prepare for the Sabbath. Some laughed, some cried. The room was full of people as at a wedding. They asked Berl's son, "What's new in America?" And Berl's son answered, "America is all right." "Do Jews make a living?" "One eats white bread there on weekdays." "Do they remain Jews?" "I'm not a Gentile." After Berl blessed the candles, father and son went to the little synagogue across the street. A new snow had fallen. The son took large steps, but Berl warned him, "Slow down." In the synagogue the Jews recited, "Let us exult and come, my groom." All the time the snow outside kept falling. After prayers, when Berl and Samuel left the holy place, the village was unrecognizable. Everything was covered in snow. One could see only the contours of the roofs and the candles in the windows. Samuel said, "Nothing has changed here." Berl had prepared gefilte fish, chicken, soup with rice, meat, carrot stew. Berl recited the benediction over a glass of ritual wine. The family ate and drank, and when it grew quiet, for a while one could hear the chirping of the house cricket. The son talked a lot, but Berl and Belge understood little. His Yiddish was different and contained foreign words. After the final blessing, Samuel asked, "Father, what did you do with all the money I sent you?" Berl raised his white brows. "It's here." "Didn't you put it into a bank?" "There is no bank in Lenchen." "Where do you keep it?" Berl hesitated. "One is not allowed to touch money on the Sabbath, but I will show you." He crouched beside the bed and began to shove something heavy. A boot appeared. Its top was stuffed with straw. Berl removed the straw, and the son saw that the boot was full of gold coins. He lifted it. "Father, this is a treasure," he called. "Well, why didn't you spend it?" "On what? Thank God we have everything." "Why didn't you travel somewhere?" "Where to? This is our home." The son asked one question after the other, but Berl's answer was always the same. They wanted for nothing. The garden, the cow, the goat, the chickens provided them with all they needed. The son said, "If thieves knew about this, your lives wouldn't be safe." "There are no thieves here." "What will happen to the money?" "You take it." Slowly, Berl and Belge grew accustomed to their son and his American Yiddish. Belge could hear him better now. She even recognized his voice. He was saying, "Perhaps we should build a larger synagogue." "A synagogue is big enough," Berl replied. "Perhaps a home for old people." "No one sleeps in the streets." The next day, after the Sabbath meal was eaten, a Gentile came from Zakrochim bringing a paper. It was the cable. Berl and Belge lay down for a nap. They soon began to snore. The goat, too, dozed off. The son put on his cloak and his hat and went for a walk. He strode with his long legs across the marketplace. He stretched out a hand and touched a roof. He wanted to smoke a cigar, but he remembered it was forbidden on the Sabbath. He had a desire to talk to someone, but it seemed that the whole of Lenchen was asleep. He entered the synagogue. An old man was sitting there reciting psalms. Samuel asked, "Are you praying?" What else is there to do when one gets old? Do you make a living? The old man did not understand the meaning of these words. He smiled, showing his empty gums, and then he said, "If God gives health, one keeps on living." Samuel returned home. Dusk had fallen. Berl went to the synagogue for the evening prayers, and the son remained with his mother. The room was filled with shadows. Berl began to recite in a solemn sing-song, "God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, defend the poor people of Israel and thy name. The holy Sabbath is departing. The welcome week is coming to us. Let it be one of health, wealth, and good deeds." "Mother, you don't need to pray for wealth," Samuel said. "You are wealthy already." Berl did not hear, or pretended not to. Her face had turned into a cluster of shadows. In the twilight, Samuel put his hand into his jacket pocket and touched his passport, his checkbook, his letters of credit. He had come here with big plans. He had a valise filled with presents for his parents. He wanted to bestow gifts on the village. He brought not only his own money, but funds from the Lenten Society in New York, which had organized a ball for the benefit of the village. But this village in the hinterland needed nothing. From the synagogue, one could hear hoarse chanting. The cricket, silent all day, started again its chirping. Berl began to sway and utter holy rhymes inherited from mothers and grandmothers. Thy holy sheep in mercy keep, in Torah and good deeds, provide for all their needs, shoes, clothes, and bread, and the Messiah's tread.